Hi and welcome to another episode of Baranov TV, designed to demystify the world of accounts and tax and to help your business grow. Now we're on the tax subject today. We've just hit the 5th of April end of financial year, so it's time once again to start to think about personal tax and your personal tax return or self-assessment form. Now I know that for a lot of people it's not the type of year that you normally think about these sorts of things. It tends to be later, but there's some real benefits to getting that done sooner rather than later. First off, if you're due a tax refund, it means that you're more likely to get the money into your account rather than having it sitting in the revenues. And I know which account I would prefer my money to be sitting in. You also have the opportunity to know what you're going to pay if you've got a resulting tax liability. You have more opportunity to find those funds over the next months rather than having a really short window to find that cash if you leave your return until later. It means that you may be able to, if you make payments on account, you may be able to adjust the payment on account that will be due at the end of July. If your income has reduced over the last 12 months, that payment on account may be set too high. So if we do your tax return earlier, that may come down, which means obviously that you've got less cash to find come July. It means that you're less likely to file your paperwork away somewhere safe with the view to pulling it out again later. Don't file it. Mark and make a note of the amounts, send it to us, whatever it may be, but don't put it away, because if you put it away, you've put it somewhere safe and you then have to remember where that was and find it all again. You've got less chance to forget between now and if you do your return in the next 6 to 8 weeks, you've got less chance to forget what's gone on. If we ask questions, it could be you've got a capital gain. If we ask questions about, well, what happened to that? What was that for? It may be that if you leave your return until the autumn, that might be a little bit more foggy in your mind as to what the details of that situation were. If you get your return information to us sooner, it means that we have more chance, more opportunity to really consider the best opportunities for you. As with any firm, when you get to December or to January, it becomes much more of a sausage machine and they just need to get done and get out. We don't have as many tax returns these days, not like in the last business, so we can give careful consideration more often than not, but it just means that we've got more capacity and more time to give proper consideration to your affairs. We don't have a team, it is just Chris and I, so we really need your paperwork as soon as possible. Definitely by the 31st of July, because we don't have a team to delegate to. So whereas the bigger firms will be able to give tax return information to anyone in the team who may not know you, may not know your affairs, and therefore may not be able to draw on that knowledge and experience, but they do have a team to pass stuff out to, and obviously we don't. So from our point of view, it's really worthwhile and we'd be very grateful to get your information as soon as possible. And finally, the biggest benefit is that you avoid the stress, the hassle, the guilt factor and the risk of any penalties by getting that information to us sooner rather than later. So what do we need? Well, essentially we need details of any worldwide income that you've received in the year ending the 5th of April 2019. So it's the last 12 months information of any worldwide income. So that could be income from any employments that you may have, any self-employment that you may have, in which case we may need to do sole trade accounts for you. So we'll need details of all of the income and expenditure through your sole trade. Could be income from business partnership, and that information will come from the partnership accounts, which feeds into the partnership tax return, into your partnership pages, and then into your personal tax return. So there is quite a process if you're involved in a business partnership. Capital gains, if you've had the sale of any assets, so it could be shares, it could be a second house, it could be your principal private residence. We will need details of all of those. And the details that we need will include things like the original purchase price and the date of the original purchase. We need details of if it was a property, of any enhancement costs. So if you put an extension on, we'll need to know when that was and what the costs were that were associated with it. And we'll need details of any associated costs relating to any of those capital gain transactions. So it could be broker's fees if you sold shares, it could be estate agent's fees or solicitor's fees if you sold a property. We'll also need details of any pensions, so details from a P60 that you'll receive from a pension, and also details if you're a recipient of a state pension, the details from your annual statement that you'll receive, because the amount will change normally 4 weeks into the year, so we need to see that statement to know what the amounts were that you received in that 12-month period. Going back to property, it could be furnished or unfurnished lets or a holiday let, in which case we need to know the gross amounts of any income that you may have received. So that's before any deductions for agents' fees. So if it's a holiday let, what the letting agent are charging you. We'll need to know the details of any expenses incurred on the property or on loans used to purchase the property or secured against the property. And also refurbishment costs. Any refurbishment costs that you've incurred in that 12-month period on any of those properties, they're dealt with in different ways depending on what they are. But if you make sure that you include all of them, then we can go through those and we can check them and make sure that everything that can be included is included, because that's where the benefit is. Obviously, there may be things that can't be, and we'll let you know which ones can't. But it would be going into too much detail to try and cover all of that off now. Interest these days is usually paid gross, but we need to know how much interest you've received on any accounts that you may hold, and whether those accounts are held individually or whether they're held jointly. Because obviously if it's a joint account, then the interest to go on your tax return will only be 50% of that interest. So make sure if you're telling us about interest, you tell us whether it's individual or joint. Income from trusts, if you receive income from a trust, you should receive a form R185, and that tells you, that certifies how much income has come to you from that trust, and we need the details from that to be able to include that too. Looking on the other side of the coin, we need to know if you've made any gift aid charitable donations. So this is where you've signed to certify that you are a UK taxpayer. So we need to include those details on your tax return. And we also need to know about any personal pension contributions that you've made, because those actually extend your basic rate tax band. So we need to know those as well. Now, obviously there's a lot there, and the thing that we've not really included is any income from the company. That can take longer to come through because it's going to depend on when the company accounts are done. So should you hold back your personal tax return information to wait for the company? Well, our answer would always be no, please don't. What we can do is we can start the work on your personal tax information before the company stuff is sorted, and what we can do is then just slot the company information in later on. So please send us your personal stuff first, and then we'll sort out the company information later and we can slot that in. So how should you collate all the information? Well, we don't actually need all of the paperwork. All that we need to make sure is that you have the paperwork that supports the figures that you give to us, should the revenue come asking any questions later on. So if we quote a figure on your tax return that you give us, you need to be able to substantiate that. Now, if you prefer to send us all the paperwork, that's absolutely fine. All I'm saying is you don't actually have to. So if you want to collate everything electronically, that's fine. If you want to send us the paper, I would suggest pop it all into an envelope, have an envelope on the side on your desk, and as everything arrives, slot that in there and then collate it and send it to us. So how do you know what to look for? Well, essentially, you can use last year's tax return as a prompt, and it is only a prompt. It will remind you of the different savings accounts you have. It will remind you of the property details that you provided to us or to your previous accountant if you've recently moved. So use it as a prompt, but also remember to add any other new sources of income that you may have had over the previous 12 months. So make sure that you include all of those. Collect everything together, as I say, either electronically or physically, and then let us have that, ideally through the document transfer system that's in the client hub of the website, because it is going to be sensitive data that you're sending us, particularly if you're sending us electronic copies of all of the certificates, because that will have lots of your personal details on. Otherwise, the last thing to remember is to whether you send us all of the paperwork and we return it to you, or whether you keep it all electronically, you must retain that for 6 full tax years after the filing deadline of the 31st of January, because the Revenue can open an inquiry and they can go back up to 6 years. So you must have those that information for a full 6 tax years. As ever, if you're unsure and you have any questions, do please get in touch. This is already a long video and I can't really go into any more detail, but if you've got a specific question, please get in touch with us and we'll give you a good answer. I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you all very soon.